What's it like to play the Nintendo Entertainment System? The Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with power.
I can remember watching the house blast off into outer space, and that weird guy in spandex calling Zelda in the first Nintendo commercials as a kid back in 1986. The robot? The gun? That thing must cost a lot of money, I thought. Strangely enough, I wasn't really all that interested. I was, after all, still playing with my Masters of the Universe figures. A few years later, I was surprised to hear on the bus on the way to school one morning that a friend of a friend had gotten Nintendo for his birthday. I was mildly interested. One day after school, I ended up at his house with our mutual friend, and we played Super Mario Bros. I can honestly say that I wasn't all that intrigued. It was fun, and the staircase to the flagpole reminded me a lot of a chocolate bar, but I was indifferent. I was more interested in some games that I had played at another friend's house. Skiing and Venture on Intellivision and Smurfs on ColecoVision held my interest, and it was the latter that I decided that I wanted for my 8th birthday. Little did I know that it would be just a little difficult to find. Phone calls to Venture, KB Toys, Babbage's, and Kmart were answered by puzzled salespeople who had no idea what I was talking about. I didn't know that in 1987, ColecoVision had been out of production for nearly 3 years. Since I wasn't getting any results, and neither was my poor mother, who was also searching high and low for my perfect birthday gift, my parents began to plant the seed in my head that I just might have to settle for that Nintendo thing I saw at my friend's house. While shopping at Venture one evening with my family, we saw it on display. "What's Nintendo?" my dad asked. "Nintendo," I corrected him. "It's the game system my friend has." There was a tinge of excitement in my voice. You know, the kind a kid has at the prospect of getting a new toy. My dad and I joked a couple of times throughout the years about his mispronunciation of Nintendo. He remembers it to this day. And as a Spanish teacher now, I'm amused to realize that ni entiendo, or ni entiendo, in Spanish means I don't even understand. As I began to tear off the wrapping paper on my birthday in 1987, I wondered to myself if my parents had come through for me with that ColecoVision, or if I'd soon be playing with power. Power it was. As she saw my face, my mother apologetically explained that ColecoVision just wasn't available anymore. Too bad eBay hadn't yet come to fruition, right? She said the salesman at Venture where she bought the Nintendo assured her that this was the next big thing, and that it was actually a lot better than ColecoVision. I didn't want to believe her. After all, just look at that controller. It was so complicated. 2 buttons, and that weird cross thing. Well, I had no choice, so we began to hook it up to the only TV in the house. A 19-inch Sony Trinitron with wood grain accents. Deep down inside, though, I was excited. Despite my excitement, I vocalized my gripe about the complicated controller when the little man failed to jump after I pressed up on the cross key. Up should jump, right? Apparently not. I had already put the game in the system and began playing before my dad could force me to read all the manuals cover to cover as he suggested. After I finally did resort to the manual and, among other things, learned to press A to jump, the game became a lot more fun and I became familiar with that liquid smooth Mario platforming control. We were a family of modest means, and like most kids, I usually got new games only on my birthday and Christmas. Such would be the pattern for the next 15 years or so. Wild Gunman, The Zapper, and a subscription to the Nintendo Fun Club News, which later became Nintendo Power, were Christmas gifts in 1987. There were occasions when I saved up the $40 to purchase a new game on my own. To my recollection, Castlevania and Kid Nicky were 2 of those games. Despite my reluctance to accept the new system, I did realize how lucky I was to have it. I was the only one I knew, save for that one friend of a friend, who later did become my friend, that actually had the NES. Soon after, however, one by one, my friends got theirs. Playdates were made, sleepovers were had, and new games were discovered, borrowed, and purchased. There is an interesting story about how I first got my hands on The Legend of Zelda. My parents and I had just gotten back from a restaurant, and my friend, the same one with the ColecoVision, who now had Nintendo, called to set up a playdate for the following day. He mentioned that he may get a new game and listed The Legend of Zelda among the possibilities. I wanted that game. I had played it at a friend's house only a couple times, but it drew me in just the same. This was the only time I can remember pitching a fit and whining to my parents. It really wasn't something I did often or at all, but after my fit, I went up to my room to cool off. Minutes later, I turned around to see my dog, Ruby, standing inside the door with a copy of The Legend of Zelda in her mouth. To this day, I still don't know why my mom had bought the game or why she thought my behavior warranted receiving it at that moment, but I didn't care. That legendary gold cartridge was mine. Unfortunately, it would perish a few years later while in the possession of one of my friends to whom I lent it. I know it wasn't his fault that the battery inside the game pack happened to die while he had it, but it sure was frustrating to have a broken game returned to me. The packaging hung around the basement in a box for quite a while, but I no longer have it, nor do I recall when I got rid of it. For my 9th birthday in 1988, I received the long-awaited Super Mario Bros. 2, but not without a hitch. My mom thought she'd be clever and wrap the game and then place it in another wrapped box, the size it's usually used to give clothing. Man, 2 birthdays in a row tinged by disappointment. My disappointment would soon turn to glee as I discovered the other wrapped gift inside that had the dimensions of a Nintendo game. Sure enough, Super Mario Bros. 2.